The scent of antiseptic and old fear clung to the walls of the Lycan medical unit, a sterile perfume Alara had long grown accustomed to. It was a smell of quiet suffering, of battles fought and lost in the deep tissues where silver poison lingered. She preferred it to the cloying scent of pack politics that wafted off the high-ranking visitors. Here, in the hushed corridors of the clinic on the edge of Blackwood territory, she was just Nurse Alara. Anonymous. Safe. A ghost in pale blue scrubs, her own scent deliberately suppressed, a faint whisper of rain and chamomile that no one ever noticed. Tonight, the quiet was a living thing, stretched thin and humming with a tension that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. It had started an hour ago, with the frantic call, the coded language that meant someone important was coming in. Not just important. Alpha-level important. The air itself had seemed to thin, crackling with ozone as a convoy of black SUVs tore into the ambulance bay, their tires screaming on the wet asphalt. They brought him in on a reinforced gurney, a mountain of a man swathed in blood-soaked bandages. Even unconscious, his power was a physical blow, a wave of raw dominance that made the orderlies flinch and the beta-level nurses lower their eyes. Alara felt it deep in her bones, a primal hum that resonated with a frequency she hadn't felt in a decade. It was terrifying. She pressed a hand to her sternum, forcing down the sudden, wild flutter in her chest. Alpha Kalen of the Blackwood Sentinels. She'd heard the whispers, of course. A true alpha of the old bloodlines, fierce, uncompromising, and ruthlessly protective of his pack. Seeing him laid low was like watching a storm cloud bleed. His face, half obscured by an oxygen mask, was starkly beautiful, all hard angles and a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble. A deep gash ran from his temple into his hairline, stitched crudely in the field. But it was the scent rolling off him that held her captive, pine after a storm, raw earth, and a potent, masculine musk that spoke of untamed power. And beneath it all, the acrid tang of silver. "Get him to Trauma 1, Dr. Anya Sharma commanded, her voice sharp and steady, cutting through the awestruck silence. "Alara, you're with me. I need vitals every 5 minutes and a full Silvertox screen." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. No. Not her. Anyone but her. To be that close to that much power was to invite notice, and notice was the one thing she could not afford. But she just nodded, her face a carefully constructed mask of professional calm, and fell into step beside the gurney. Her fingers trembled as she reached for his wrist, the skin unexpectedly warm beneath the cool leather of her gloves. The moment her skin made contact, a jolt, white-hot and electric, shot up her arm. It was more than static electricity. It was a shock of recognition, a soul-deep clang of a bell that had been silent her entire life. In the sterile theater of Trauma 1, under the glare of surgical lights, she worked on autopilot. She drew blood, her movements economical and precise. She hooked up the foredrip, her gaze fixed on the plastic tubing, on anything but the man on the bed. But she couldn't escape him. His presence filled the room, a low thrum of energy that vibrated in her teeth. His scent was a constant assault on her senses, bypassing her carefully constructed shields and sinking directly into her soul. It felt like home. The thought was so alien, so dangerous, that she nearly dropped the saline bag. Dr. Sharma finished her examination, her expression grim. Multiple deep lacerations, 3 broken ribs, and a severe concussion. But the silver is the real problem. It's deep in the tissue of his left shoulder. His wolf is fighting it, but it's slowing his healing to a crawl. He'll need constant monitoring. She turned, her dark eyes finding Alara's. "You'll take the first watch. His beta is just outside, but he's too agitated. You have a calming presence, Alara. He needs that. A calming presence." They had no idea. Her calm was a cage she had built around a hurricane. But she couldn't refuse a direct order. "Yes, doctor." The hours crawled by. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the private room. Kaelin's beater, a broad-shouldered wolf named Ronan with worry etched into his face, had looked her over with a piercing gaze before retreating to the hallway. Alone with the alpha, Ilara felt stripped bare. The pull toward him was a physical thing now, a taut silver cord tying her navel to his. She fought it, focusing on the minutiae of her job. She checked the drip rate. She recorded his temperature. She smoothed the blanket over his chest, her hand hovering for a second too long over the steady rise and fall of his powerful form. A low groan rumbled from his throat. Ilara froze, her hand still in the air. His head turned on the pillow, a restless, pained movement. His eyelids fluttered. She should call the doctor. She should step back. Instead, she found herself leaning closer, her breath catching in her throat. His eyes opened. They weren't the brown she'd expected. They were a stunning, luminous silver, the color of a winter moon. They were hazy with pain and confusion, but they found her instantly. They locked onto her, and the world fell away. The beeping of the monitor, the smell of antiseptic, the cold weight of her past, it all vanished, consumed by the incandescent heat in his gaze. His lips parted, a rough, cracked sound escaping. It wasn't her name. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a primal declaration that shook the foundations of her world. Mine. The word hit her like a physical force, slamming the air from her lungs. The silver cord between them ignited, a searing line of fire that branded her soul. The mate bond. It was real. And it was hers. A sob of pure terror caught in her throat. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth, her carefully built walls crumbling into dust. The alpha on the bed, the most powerful, visible, and dangerous man in their world, was her mate. And her life, the quiet, safe life she had bled for, was over. Panic was a cold, venomous thing coiling in her gut. She had to get out. She turned toward the door, her only thought to flee, to run until the scent of pine and power was a distant memory. But his voice, stronger this time, snagged her. Don't. It wasn't a command roared with alpha authority. It was a plea, raw and threaded with a vulnerability that stopped her cold. She looked back. He was trying to push himself up on an elbow, his face contorted in a mask of pain. The heart monitor began to beep erratically, the rhythm accelerating into a frantic, panicked tattoo. Alpha, she said, her voice a reedy whisper. She forced herself to move back to the bedside. You need to lie still. You'll tear your stitches. He breathed, his silver eyes tracking her every move. His gaze was a physical touch, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her neck. Your scent. I know you. I'm your nurse, she said, her voice shaking. She reached out to adjust his pillow, a purely professional gesture that felt like the most intimate act of her life. His skin was feverish. His hand, large and calloused, shot out, capturing her wrist. The contact was electric. His grip wasn't crushing, but it was absolute. There was no escape. No, he rasped, his thumb stroking the delicate skin of her inner wrist, right over her frantic pulse. More, he closed his eyes for a moment, a pained frown creasing his brow. My wolf, he knows you. He's been screaming for you. Ilara's own inner wolf, a creature she had starved and silenced for a decade, whimpered in response. It wanted to press against him, to offer comfort, to feel the reassurance of his strength. She shoved the instinct down with brutal force. This was a death sentence. Alphas like him didn't mate with nameless, clanless strays. They made political alliances. And even if he wanted her, his world was one of violence, of challenges and rivals. A mate was a target, a weakness to be exploited. She had spent her life running from that kind of danger. You're delirious from the fever, she said, trying to tug her hand free. The silver poisoning is causing hallucinations. His eyes snapped open, the silver hardening to steel. I am not hallucinating, the alpha tone was back. A low growl that vibrated through her bones, making her want to submit, to expose her throat. The ancient, instinctual response horrified her. Tell me your name. It doesn't matter. Tell me, he commanded, his grip tightening just enough to remind her of the power he held, even broken and bleeding in a hospital bed. She swallowed hard, the lie she had lived for years feeling like ash in her mouth. Elara. Elara, he repeated, the name a soft rumble in his chest. He held her gaze, and in the depths of his eyes, she saw not just possession, but confusion, a dawning wonder. Why are you so afraid of me? The question was so direct, so perceptive, it stole her breath. Because you represent everything I ran from. Because your power could shatter my peace. Because the last alpha, who looked at me with possession, left scars on my soul that will never fade. She couldn't say any of that. So she said nothing, her silence a wall between them. A sharp knock preceded the door opening. The beater, Ronan, stepped inside, his eyes immediately going to Kaelin's hand on Alara's wrist. His expression tightened. Alpha, you should be resting. I am fine, Kaelin bit out, though a sheen of sweat on his forehead belied the words. He didn't release Alara. Leave us. Ronan's gaze shifted to Alara, assessing and sharp. He saw the terror in her eyes, the way she held herself perfectly still, like a fawn caught in the glare of a predator. His loyalty was to his alpha, but he was not a fool. He addressed her, his voice carefully neutral. Nurse, Dr. Sharma requires an update. It was an out, a lifeline. She looked from Ronan's stern face to Kaelin's intense one. Kaelin's grip on her wrist was the only thing anchoring her to the spinning room. He was her mate. The bond hummed between them, a song of destiny she wanted no part of. Choosing to leave felt like tearing her own skin, but choosing to stay felt like walking back into a fire. Let her go, Kaelin, Ronan said, his voice low and firm. You're scaring her. The words seemed to penetrate Kaelin's pain-filled haze. His eyes widened slightly as he truly looked at her, at the pallor of her skin and the tremor in her hand. His grip loosened. With a final, lingering stroke of his thumb over her pulse point, he let her go. The release was so abrupt she stumbled back a step. The loss of contact was a cold shock, a sudden, aching void. She wrapped her arms around herself, rubbing the spot where his hand had been. Without a word, she turned and fled the room, ignoring the alpha's pained call of her name. In the hallway, she leaned against the cool wall, dragging in a shaky breath. Ronan was beside her in an instant. Are you all right? She nodded, unable to speak. He is not himself, Ronan said, his voice a low apology. The silver, it makes him volatile. Primal. I understand, she whispered, though she didn't. She understood the silver, but the raw, possessive need in Kaelin's eyes had felt older, deeper than any poison. He's never reacted to anyone like that, Ronan continued, watching her closely. The bond, it must be strong. Elara flinched. He knew. Of course, he knew. A beta would recognize the signs of his alpha finding his mate. There is no bond, she lied, the words tasting like poison. He's mistaken. Ronan's eyes narrowed. A wolf does not mistake its mate. He fell silent for a moment, his gaze dropping to her hands, which she was wringing nervously. He saw the faint, silvery scar that peeked out from under the cuff of her scrubs, a delicate crescent moon on her left wrist. His breath hitched. It was a symbol he'd only ever seen in old texts. Who are you? He asked, his voice no longer just concerned, but filled with a sudden, sharp awe. Before she could answer, a blood-curdling scream tore through the quiet of the ward. It was Kaelin's. They burst back into the room to find him convulsing on the bed, his back arched in an impossible angle, his powerful body seizing violently. The heart monitor shrieked a continuous, flat tone. Silver shock. Ronan roared, hitting the emergency button on the wall. Get Sharma. But Alara knew the doctor wouldn't be fast enough. The poison was in his heart, his lungs. She could feel it through the bond, a cold, creeping death. All her fear, all her resistance, was incinerated by a single, overwhelming thought: I can't lose him. She didn't know why she did it. Instinct took over, an impulse deeper than thought. She surged forward, pushing past Ronan, and placed both her hands on Kaelin's chest. She closed her eyes, shutting out the violent thrashing, the alarms, the panicked shouts. She reached for the bond, that shimmering silver cord between them, and she pulled. She called on the power she had kept dormant for a decade, the power her grandmother had told her was a curse. A soft, pearlescent light bloomed from her palms, sinking into Kaelin's skin. It wasn't hot, it was cool, like moonlight on water. She could feel the silver, a network of black, thorny veins spreading through him. Her light surrounded it, not fighting it, but soothing it. Gentling it. She whispered the old words, the lullabies of her bloodline, channeling all of her will into a single, desperate plea: live. The seizing began to subside. The violent arches of his back lessened, his muscles unknotting. The shrieking monitor settled, finding a rhythm again, slow, weak, but steady. Kaelin's body went limp, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The light from Alara's hands faded, leaving her dizzy and drained, her legs trembling. She swayed, and Ronan's strong arm was there to catch her. He stared from her to his alpha, his face a mask of disbelief. Dr. Sharma burst in with two other nurses, skidding to a halt at the sight of the now calm room. What happened? The doctor demanded, rushing to Kaelin's side. He stabilized, Ronan said, his eyes still fixed on Alara. She did something. Dr. Sharma checked Kaelin's vitals, her brow furrowed in confusion. His fevers dropped. The arrhythmia is gone. How? Alara pulled away from Ronan, hugging her arms to her chest. I don't know. I just held him. But Ronan knew it was more. He looked at the crescent moon scar on her wrist, then at her pale, exhausted face. Moonweaver, he breathed, the words full of reverence and shock. By the ancestors, you're a Moonweaver. The name, spoken aloud after so long, was like a physical blow. Alara recoiled, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know what you're talking about. She backed away toward the door. I need some air. She fled, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She had revealed herself. In her desperation to save the man, who was her mate, she had just painted a target on her own back. For 2 days, she avoided him. She traded shifts, took on paperwork, hid in the supply closets whenever she heard Ronan's heavy tread in the hallway. But the bond was a constant presence, a low thrum beneath her skin. She felt Kaelin's frustration, his growing strength, his constant, searching thoughts for her. It was an intimacy she wasn't ready for, a violation of the privacy she cherished. On the 3rd day, she was cornered. Dr. Sharma caught her at the nurse's station. Alara. Alpha Kaelin is asking for you. Specifically. He's refusing his evening medication until he speaks with you. Alara's stomach twisted. Doctor, I don't care what you think, Anya said, her tone leaving no room for argument. My patient's recovery is paramount. He's stable, but agitated. He needs calm. You are calm. Go. Defeated, she walked the green-tiled hallway to his room. It felt like walking to her own execution. She paused at the door, took a deep, fortifying breath, and pushed it open. Kaelin was sitting up in bed, his bare chest crisscrossed with bandages, but the raw power was back in his shoulders, the color back in his face. His silver eyes found her, and the intensity in them made her want to bolt. Ronan was standing by the window, but at a gesture from Kaelan, he nodded and silently exited the room, closing the door behind him. They were alone. "You've been avoiding me," Kaelan said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and steady now, without the ragged edge of pain. "I've been busy," she lied weakly, her gaze fixed on a crack in the floor tiles. "Look at me, Elara." The quiet command was harder to resist than any roar. Slowly, she lifted her head. The hunger was still in his eyes, but it was tempered now with something else. Curiosity. Respect. Or? "Ronan told me what you did," he said softly. "He said you saved my life. That you are a Moonweaver." She flinched, wrapping her arms around her waist. It was a myth. A children's story. It didn't feel like a myth, he gestured to his own chest. "I felt you. I felt the poison receding. I felt light." "Your light," he paused, his gaze softening. "Thank you." The simple gratitude disarmed her more than any demand would have. "You would have healed on your own," she mumbled. "No," he said with certainty. "I wouldn't have." The silver was laced with wolfsbane. It was designed to kill. Valerus made sure of that. Elara's head snapped up. "Valerus. Your head enforcer." Kaelan's expression darkened. "My former head enforcer. He led my patrol into an ambush. He wanted the alpha seat. He thought he'd succeeded." The pieces clicked into place. The attack, the specialized poison, the political threat. And now, she was standing in the middle of it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small. "Don't be," Kaelan said. "He will be dealt with." "But his betrayal raises other questions," he held her gaze. "Why is a Moonweaver, whose bloodline was thought to be extinct for 5 centuries, working as a nurse on the edge of my territory?" This was it. The moment she had dreaded. The truth was a dangerous, heavy thing. "I wanted a quiet life," she whispered. "My family, we were hunted. The power was a beacon. It was safer to hide. To be no 1 inch. You are not no one," he said, his voice fierce, cutting through her defenses. "You are my mate." There it was again. That undeniable claim. But this time, it sounded different. Not just possession, but a statement of partnership. A fact that changed everything. "I can't be," she pleaded, the words tearing from her throat. "Kaelan, you don't understand. To be your mate is to be a target. I can't. I won't live like that again." The memory of her family's killers, of the fire and the screams, rose like bile in her throat. He saw the raw trauma in her eyes. His expression softened with a pain that was not his own. "I would never let anyone harm you." "You couldn't stop them from harming you," she retorted, her voice cracking. The truth of her words hit him. He fell silent, his jaw tight. He was powerful, yes, but he was not invincible. Valerus had proven that. "Then we protect each other," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. He held out his hand. Not a command. An invitation. "Elara. I don't know what this means, this bond, this fate. But I know that for the first time since the ambush, the thought of the future doesn't feel like a battle. It feels like hope. Because you're in it." Her heart ached. This was everything she was terrified of, and everything she had secretly, desperately, wanted. A partner. A protector. A home. But was she brave enough to take it? The door to the room suddenly burst open. Valerus stood there, flanked by 2 guards she didn't recognize. His eyes were cold, his lips twisted in a smirk. Well, well," he said, his gaze flicking from a weakened Kaelan to Elara. "The Alpha is awake. And he's found himself astray. He sniffed the air, his eyes widening in surprise as he caught her true scent, the one she'd released in her panic and healing. No. Not astray. There's old magic on you. Kalen was already moving, swinging his legs off the bed, his body tensing for a fight he wasn't ready for. Valerus. You traitorous dog. Your reign is over, old friend, Valerus sneered, drawing a wicked, silver-coated blade. And I'll start by taking your new toy. He lunged, not at Kalen, but at Alara. Time slowed. She saw the flash of silver, the murderous intent in his eyes. Kalen roared, a desperate, furious sound, but he was too far, too injured. Ronan was locked outside. She was alone. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. The fear, the years of hiding, the ingrained instinct to flee, it all burned away, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. He will not touch what is mine. She didn't run. She stood her ground. As Valerus's hand reached for her, she lifted her own. The moonlight, the power of her ancestors, surged through her veins. It wasn't gentle this time. It was a shield, a weapon. A blast of pure, white energy erupted from her palm, slamming into the traitor's chest. Valerus was thrown backward, as if struck by lightning, crashing into his own men. The silver knife clattered to the floor. He stared at her, his face a mixture of shock and pain, a burn mark smoking on his tunic. The commotion brought Ronan and the loyal pack guards crashing through the door. They saw the scene, Kalen on his feet, snarling, Valerus and his cronies on the floor, and Alara, standing between them, her hand still outstretched, shimmering with residual power. The fight was over before it began. Valerus was subdued, his treachery laid bare for all to see. In the ringing silence that followed, Alara's legs finally gave out. She sank to her knees, the adrenaline leaving her weak and trembling. A pair of strong arms were around her instantly. Kalen. He knelt before her, ignoring his own injuries, and pulled her against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her scent. You're safe, he murmured, his voice thick with relief and awe. You are magnificent. She looked up at him, into those beautiful, silver eyes. The fear was gone. In its place was a tentative, fragile bud of trust. He hadn't tried to control her or hide her. He had seen her power, and he called it magnificent. I am your mate, Kalen, she said, her voice clear and steady. It wasn't a surrender. It was a choice. Her choice. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his harsh features into something breathtaking. He leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers, the contact a promise, a beginning. And I, he whispered, the Alpha's claim now a vow of equals, am yours.